Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by Brendan Miller from the CHGO podcast. Brendan, good to have you back on, buddy.
I love being on the show, Greg. I know it's dangerous because I know when I come on the show, it's not you, it's me. I could talk Cubs, minor league baseball, big league baseball for like 3 hours. And so you have to cut me off whenever I come on the show.
Dude, I typically when I'm hopping on with somebody that's not on, whether it's not Zumac or Brian or somebody else that's not on like frequently,
Yeah.
I'm talking to them before we hit record. I'm like, hey, like, are you good for 45 minutes? Are you good for an hour? Like, do you have a cutoff time? I didn't even do that with you because I
No.
assumed that you're just game to talk baseball for like 3 hours.
It's Sunday. All I do on Sunday is watch baseball and talk baseball. This is like my
Well,
baseball day.
we won't go 3 hours today. We're gonna try to keep it to an hour to make you guys happy out there. But
To
really,
make your wife happy.
exactly. That's probably more like it. Yeah. We'll bump up. I mean, pretty good up until the Cubs game on Sunday. We're recording this on Sunday morning. So for you guys out there, if we're mentioning players, I always like to preface this as we're getting into some of the numbers and some of the players. We are recording Sunday morning. The games on Sunday throughout the system have not yet happened. So we're going to talk about like Brennan Davis's numbers. Those don't include Sunday afternoon's numbers in Iowa. We're going to get into Luis Vazquez a little bit here today and what that means or why he's not up in Chicago yet. We're going to talk Owen Casey. We're going to get into some of the StatCast numbers in AAA because that's what you do best, Brendan, is breaking down some of the numbers that maybe we don't entirely understand and you make them make sense. So we're going to talk about StatCast in AAA a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the reliever maneuvering throughout the system because there's some guys making their way up to the highest levels in Chicago and Iowa as far as relief prospects go. And then we're going to end the show. We've gotten a few requests over the past couple months about kind of mentioning and talking about some of the young guys in Chicago, the guys that are no longer prospects or they still might be prospects, but they're in Chicago doing their thing. So we're going to get into guys like PCA and Canario and Ben Brown and guys like that towards the end of the show. And really, I mean, all the guys we're going to talk about were prospects to begin the year. And so like they're kind of in that transition period where they're not necessarily Chicago regulars, but they're not prospects anymore. They deserve some love on the show. Maybe not every week, but I think Brendan, you being on, that's a good opportunity to talk about those guys.
Let's do it.
All right. So I think we got to start off with the crazy week that Brennan Davis has been having. We got to talk about Brennan Davis, dude. It is one of the most ridiculous streaks, and maybe not only ridiculous streaks, but just like unexpected. This was an unexpected hot streak from Brennan Davis over the past 8 days. This is entering Sunday. Over the past 8 days, he has 7 home runs in the last 8 days. He is batting .500. He's 12 for 24 at the plate. He scored 14 runs. He has 15 RBIs in the last 8 games. The dude is, I don't think I've ever seen a player this hot. And again, this unpredictable. He was still kind of working his way back. We were hoping to see him comfortable. And all of a sudden he rattles off 7 home runs in 8 days. It's amazing, dude. It's amazing.
I remember looking at Brennan's stat line about, I don't know, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, just before he went off on this tear. I saw the walk rate near 20%. I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. You know, he's seeing pitches and maybe the bulk run production numbers aren't there, but he's seeing pitches. I was reading some of your guys' work and following you guys on Twitter, and there was discussion about if his athleticism or twitchiness or however you want to describe it, if it had decreased post back injuries and all that. And there was some chatter that it did. And all of a sudden, 7 home runs in 8 days. And we're back talking about Brennan Davis in this context. First off, could have happened to a better guy. We had Corey and I had a chance to talk to Brennan right before the pandemic, actually.
Yeah.
And the nicest, mature young dude I think we had the pleasure of talking to during that time. So seeing Brennan have this success, the power, seeing pitches, all the adversity with the injuries, it's awesome to see.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we were just hoping, I think entering this season, we were just hoping for Brennan to kind of put himself back on the map. I was just hoping for a healthy season out of Brennen Davis, right? I didn't even want to see him put up like crazy numbers. I just wanted to see him put up average numbers and stay healthy the entire year. And right now he has the highest OPS plus in the entire system.
It's crazy.
I know that Pablo Aliendo has like a 139 OPS plus over the course of like 92 at bats, or 92 plate appearances, but minimum 100. Brennan Davis is leading the entire system with a 136 OPS plus. It's outrageous.
So we're getting questions about the big league team. Brennan Davis seems like he's going to deserve a call up at some point, whether it be next week, in 2 weeks, a month. At some point, you imagine the Cubs will reward him.
Yeah.
How he gets playing time is going to be tricky, I think. The reason being, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but P. Crow Armstrong is still up on the big league team. He's exceeding my expectations at the big league level. So what does that mean for PCA? Does he get called down back to Iowa to get more plate appearances? Similarly, do you trust Morel defensively at third base and use one of Mastroboni or Madrigal's roster spots for Brennan Davis? Then the question becomes with Brennan Davis, if you want to see what is in his, recent power surge, do you take away at bats from Michael Busch? And do you take away at bats from Patrick Wisdom, who has batted leadoff in the past week and hasn't really had a consistent playing track record this season? It's a complicated situation, but for me, he deserves to get some opportunities. When an extreme like this happens, 7 home runs in 10 days, the previous precedent of being a very highly rated top prospect, this is one of those extreme situations that it always piques my curiosity.
Yeah, I think you use the word reward with a promotion, and I think that's the best way to describe this, is that like he was a former literally top prospect in the organization. And so he has that track record. He is as hot as they come. And so he hasn't necessarily done this over the course of half of a season or a few months. He's really used this hot streak to really put his OPS where it is now, and his season-wide numbers where it is now. So it's not like, he's just done this for so long and now he needs a promotion. It's just sometimes you got to ride a hot streak. Sometimes you got to reward a guy for being as hot as he is and fighting his way back, right? Like it's worth pointing out that like him battling back from all these injuries, like he deserves some sort of reward for this. And I think a promotion to the major leagues is probably that. But how does he fit in, dude? I don't know that. I don't know how he fits in.
Well, that's why they have career counsel to make these decisions. But to your point about having the larger sample size, sample size is always that nerdy phrase we always use, right? Sample size is fair, but for when I watch these games and these stretches, I'm looking for like the crazy things. I'm looking for the outliers. Yeah. And 7 home runs in 8 days, the extreme walk rate over the course of the first 6 weeks of the season, those aren't normal trends. Like when we look at even Tyson Miller back on the Cubs, he only had 11 innings with Seattle, but the slider shape looked different. It was enough justification or reason for the front office to believe he would be productive or have a chance to be productive throughout the course of the year. A big stretch like this, one of those broken data points, to me is actually more interesting than like a long sample size. We've seen long sample sizes with Matt Mervis and it doesn't translate well at times. I want to see the craziest things, and Brennan Davis right now is presenting one of those crazy outlier trends.
That's a really good point, actually. I didn't really consider that part of it. So say Brennan Davis does get called up here, right? So say he gets promoted. I know that Craig Counsell can probably handle it, but I don't see a scenario where Brennan Davis gets promoted with PCA being sent back down to AAA. That I don't see that happening, right? So you look at the other outfield position. I mean, I know Brennan's not really playing center fields like that. He's just an outfielder. Is PCA. Yeah. Seiya Suzuki is back, and you're not gonna sit down Seiya for Brennan Davis. Brennan it's a situation where it kind of reminds me a little bit of Miguel Amaya last year.
I was talking to Corey about this. I'm like, it's kind of like a more extreme version of Amaya, kind of like injuries and just comes up and cements himself.
Yeah, and honestly, it's very similar where we were basically dropping Miguel Amaya down prospect rankings only because of the injury, not because he wasn't putting up numbers. It was only because he couldn't because he was injured. And like you're worried about him returning from injury. And so that's why he slid down prospect rankings. Same with Brennan Davis, is that's why he slid down prospect rankings. And then I believe that it was like right before, or hold on, last year, it might have been like I think it was mid-season. I got my mid-season prospect rankings out, and Miguel Amaya was not yet up to Chicago, or the timing was weird on that. But I was able to see what he could do, and I bumped him back up prospect rankings into the top 10. We could be looking at a situation again this year with Brennan Davis where I bump him back up into the top 10 potentially. I don't know. But right in preparation for his promotion up to Chicago. Now, the problem is with Miguel Amaya, I was really worried about him coming up to Chicago and not getting consistent playing time. It's like he missed so much time. We need as many at-bats for Miguel Amaya as possible. And I'm looking at Brennan Davis and seeing the same situation where it's like, I don't want to see Brennan called up. And it worked out well. I think it worked out great with Mickey. But I don't want to see I don't want to see Brennan Davis get called up to Chicago and only playing like 3 times a week. I want to see him playing most games. I want to see him getting as many at bats as possible this season. So that's a big like balance that you have to take into account. I feel like
when Canario was called up, the way he was used, were you okay with that?
No, I that can't happen with Brennan Davis.
It's going to be the same thing with Brennan Davis then.
Yeah,
because that's the role that he would play.
And I wasn't happy with that happening with Canario. I would be I'd be so upset if that happened with Brennan. It's like because you're writing this hot. I mean, look at Canario last year, right? Canario last year was coming back from injury. He came up to Iowa. He was riding this real hot streak in Iowa. They called him up to Chicago. This is a different manager, obviously. This was David Ross. They called him up to the major league level, and then they benched him. It's like you're calling him up because of this hot streak. You have to play the kid. And so, if Brennan Davis was called up and had that Alexander Canario role where he's playing, what was he 3 times a week, essentially 3 times a week, more or less,
3 times a week,
like maybe less than that.
Yeah,
that can't happen with Brennan. I feel like
the way he may not play 3 days a week and play more, maybe how they used Mervis when Mervis was called up, who did get consistent playing time prior to his demotion again. The way that would work is moving Bellinger to first base. That way, if you want to play Brennan defensively, well, you can move him around the outfield. Can he play center field? Is he going to be able to play center field?
He hasn't this year.
Okay. Well, if you
want, really, they've been playing Owen Casey has been playing center field a little bit more recently, with Brennan staying on the corners, which is interesting.
So Brennan, maybe can he play right field? Do you think at Wrigley Field?
Brennan can play both corner spots.
He's gonna. So let's say Suzuki's DHing today. Okay. So if you want to give some playing time defensively, Brennan can play right field. Seiya can DH. Now Brennan could DH as well, and what that would do is it would force Bellinger to, let's say, first base, and you would have PCA and Talkman in center field. Bellinger would play more first base, which means you subtract plate appearances from Michael Busch or Patrick Wisdom. Being a right-handed batter, you would imagine that Wisdom's at-bats would be subtracted, and that's the balance. So when Craig Counsell is looking at who's going to provide the most value over the short term, but also get the consistent reps, that way by August you have a bat that you can rely on off the bench. That's going to be the push-pull balance that I think Craig Counsell will have to figure out. You can easily make the argument that Wisdom deserves playing time right now because he has the max effort numbers. He has a career 110 WRC plus. To take away opportunities might hurt his potential to provide runs in August and September if you give Brennan chances right now. On the reverse end, though, if you don't give Brennan Davis this opportunity, Brennan Davis probably has a higher ceiling than Patrick Wisdom, given the youth and the unpredictability. It's a weird balance that we'll have to figure out.
So you said the high ceiling part. I was actually going to get into that because I thought you'd be the person to talk to about this. We're talking about how do you find a spot in the lineup for Brennan Davis, and at the same exact time, you're looking at this lineup in Chicago and you're saying, where is the offense?
Yeah.
And so it's weird to say both. It's weird to say there's not a space for this guy who's killing it in AAA, while also in the next 2 minutes after saying that, being like, this offense kind of sucks. and it's because, I mean, we talked about it all offseason. I know that the problem is there's not really true middle of the order bats on this roster, right?
Yeah.
And so you have a whole bunch of guys that are like, okay, they might be like a 110 WRC plus, give or take like 10 points, right? They're those guys that are like the 5, 6, 7 hitters, not the 2, 3, 4 hitters. And so like you're looking at Brennan Davis like, okay, is Brennan Davis going to be that much better than what Ian Happ is doing or Seiya has been doing or Patrick Wisdom has been doing or Michael Busch? Is like, I don't know, but also he might be that really high outcome, like the high potential guy that is needed in this lineup in Chicago. I don't know. It's a quirky situation for sure.
Yeah, I would be surprised if we're looking back at this offense in August with the same type of mindset that, oh, this offense sucks.
Mm-hmm.
With Bellinger getting healthy, Seiya getting healthy, Nico and Dansby hopefully coming back next week, Ian Happ stabilizing, Mike Tauchman continuing to show above average value, Morel on this trajectory of being an all-star on the periphery. I'd be surprised if the offense is in this bad standing, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But my perspective has always been, I would like to risk it, and risking it means you take away at bats from some guys who have longer track records. Now, does that mean I'm vouching for Brennan Davis over Patrick Wisdom? Not necessarily, but when push comes to shove, I probably would play Brennan Davis more, just because I want to see the absolute most extreme outcome. And for this team right now, they need those types of extreme outcomes, guys. When you go into a year projected as 84, 85 wins, you have to be part of the group, the part of the teams where you're missing your win projection by like 7 to 10 wins. Only 30% of teams do that. You have to be the 30th percentile outcome where you break the projections. The only way you do that is to get surprise performances. And right now, those surprise performances are Morel, maybe Busch, depending on your expectations. Shota Imanaga has surprised everyone. And PCA could be one of those guys, but you still need to push the boundaries, and Brennan Davis presents one of those possibilities. It's different when we talk about Brennan Davis. It's different than saying, oh, okay, you're gonna call him up, and he's, of course, going to provide value. It's not that. I'm not even confident he can do that. What I'm confident in is that now that possibility presents itself. So I feel as if the Cubs are required to explore that potential for one of those high extreme outcomes.
Can I put you on the spot with, I don't know if you have Brennan Davis's, is there anything StatCast wise, the whiff rate or anything like that stands out with Brennan this year?
Same whiff rate as Matt Mervis, same whiff rate as Owen Casey. So how you interpret that is up to you. The whiff rate is just under 70%, right around the 70-ish percent. Not crazy bad, but when you try to imagine how that translates to the big league level, I personally, whether it's fair or justified, I just chop off a few points. So if he gets called up, I'm like, all right, he's going to be around a 65% guy. And that's the lower...
That's the contact rate on that.
Yes, that's a contact rate.
Yep.
That's going to be lower 10th percentile. So that means he has to slug at a crazy number to justify consistent playing time. Then the question becomes, can he do that?
Yeah, I'll wrap this up by saying that things get a whole lot easier for Brennan Davis and him being called up to Chicago if there's another injury in the for outfielders specifically. That's a 1-for-1.
So right? You're vouching for another injury?
I'm not vouching for it, but man, there's been so many that like, is it really that crazy to think that there's going to be another one tomorrow?
Hey, how's that hamstring, Ian Happ? Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, exactly. It takes one outfield guy and Brennan's up. It takes one guy in general and Brennan might be up, but specifically an outfielder.
I mean, one question for you before we move on, because I don't know this. Defensively, is he like cool playing both left and right field? Is there going to be a preference for either or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably either one seems fine. He's played a lot of left field this year, but I gotta say I'm less confident in his glove out there than I was a few years ago. And
in
part
terms
of that
of
is
just like speed or just like
in
jump
terms of
or
him,
what?
Him getting to baseballs a little bit, and then he's just looked a little, in my opinion, again, and we say this every time we talk about defense on the show, is that like you only see so many defensive opportunities, especially for outfielders, while you're kind of taking in minor league action across each day. but he's looked just like a little bit more unsteady out there in terms of like the routes to baseballs and getting to baseballs and making a play once he gets there. I don't know. I'm not saying he's not a bad outfielder. I think he's perfectly fine in left and right field. His arm is good enough to play right field for sure.
Yeah.
I think he's fine out there. I don't know that I'd trust him in center field.
Well, you've been spoiled by PCA playing defense out there. PCA is your reference marker.
Yeah, that I'm screwed. Any outfielder from here on out is just like you guys suck because you're not PCA.
Dude, he's so good out there. He's so good.
Let's go real quick. So before we were recording, we were talking about the Nico Hoerner injury saga, and we won't go into too much detail there because I know you could talk for half an hour just on Nico not being put on the IL.
We were going to do that,
but so we got Dansby Swanson on the IL. He's supposed to return, I believe, Tuesday. From the IL. We got Nico Hoerner, who should have been on the IL, and he's not been put on the IL, and he's been out for the past week or so. Luis Vazquez was not called up, and I know that on this show, whether it was I think with you, it was with Brian, with Zumac, every single person we've talked to, I think with Alex Cohen, we kind of made the point that if the scenario happened, God forbid, where Dansby Swanson and Nico Hoerner both got injured, that Luis Vazquez, that would be the perfect opportunity for him to be called up. Well, that did happen, unfortunately, and Luis Vazquez was not called up. And I don't want to go into too much detail in terms of speculating as to why he was not called up, but I will point out that Luis Vazquez has been on a rough run at the plate over the past a couple weeks or so. He is batting well under 200 over the past couple weeks. Overall in the season, his numbers are pretty much back to just a league average. He is batting 270 with a 369 OBP. He's got a 778 OPS, which like you look at a 778 OPS and you're like, oh, that's pretty good. Well, the league-wide OPS in the International League is 769, which is outrageously high.
That's crazy.
So Luis Vazquez, his OPS plus is just 101 this season. So he's basically just a league average bat over the course of the season. Taking into account he was really hot early in the season. He came back down to earth. It was just more normal for a stretch. And recently he's been ice cold. So I think that is worth pointing out and saying that, hey, it wasn't a given that he would get called up to Chicago with Dansby and Nico if he was riding this ice cold streak like he was. It was just really crappy timing as far as that's concerned for Luis.
I'm surprised he's not called up. When we talk about who deserves call-ups, there's always some discomfort for me because there's behind the scenes reasons for why guys get called up and don't get called up. I could very easily point to Pete Crow Armstrong's call up and say, okay, he didn't deserve it, given that the offensive struggles early on were evident. And when he was called up, Correct Counsel said Pete is up due to injury, because at the time it was Bellinger who went down, and they needed a defensive guy to play center field. Very easily can make the same argument for Luis Vazquez. Your Gold Glove duo middle infielder are both out. You need a shortstop. Miles Mastrobuoni has made some fine plays, but at the same time, on Saturday, made 2 routine plays that, quite frankly, you give me my A2000, I might make those plays. Correct. Maybe.
I don't doubt it for a second.
We'll see. My arm is just like, it's a wrap.
You would have gotten to the ball. You would have been fine as far as that's.
I would have fielded it perfectly.
Yeah.
My glove work has always been spectacular. It's just my arm has always been an issue. But you would have thought that Luis Vazquez would have had the perfect opportunity to showcase, at the very least, defense, just like Pete Crow Armstrong was able to showcase. The offense is fine, like a 101 OPS plus, league average. That is all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for offensive production with the type of Brennan Davis potential. I'm asking him to pick up the ball, throw it to first base, come off the bench here or there, provide slightly above replacement level production. It's not that big of an ask.
Yeah. So I will. 2 things. One related to Luis, one not. The first one not. So you said you can field every ball, but throwing is an issue.
It is.
You know who that describes?
Just like Christopher Morel, right?
I was thinking Nick Madrigal, but okay.
Whoa! All right, I'm locking off. You can do this show by yourself. The complete other end of where you were going with that. Okay.
But Luis Vazquez, though,
I'm taller than Nick Magical, by the way. Don't confuse that for people who don't know.
Oh
You know,
man,
I'm 5'11".
I don't
on
even
a
remember
good
what I was
day.
gonna say about Luis Vazquez. What was I getting at? Something about Luis Vazquez and his offensive profile.
Oh,
I don't remember.
He has 22% strikeout rate. He's had
Yeah.
more power than we expected. When I saw him in spring training, I thought the mechanics were a little unorthodox, weren't quite clean. But again, it's a matter of expectations. The expectation for PCA is defense plus offense. The expectation for me for Vasquez is just defense.
Yeah, so I posted a poll on Twitter asking people their thoughts on, I guess, expectations of Luis Vazquez when he gets called up, right? So basically I put, hey, are you expecting a WRC plus of above or below 90? Because I thought that was kind of a, right, if you're looking at Luis Vazquez, if he's providing really strong defense at shortstop, you're not expecting him to post a WRC plus above 100. At least I'm not, right?
No.
And so I put the over under at 90, and the responses I thought were pretty interesting. I'm trying to pull it up here now.
Was it like equally mixed?
It was, yeah. I think that it favored. I got a lot of votes on that. I think it favored Luis Vazquez posting a WRC plus above 90.
I voted for this, by the way.
Did you vote for above 90 or below 90?
I put below 90. I think you can't have a confident reason to say above 90, but I don't think it's far away from 90.
Okay,
as unrealistic.
So yeah, it was a majority below 90. It was 60% of people said it would be below 90, which I was happy to see that, because I know that expectations when prospects get called up, or in Vasquez's case, do not get called up. When they get called up, the expectation is like they're gonna kill it, and if they don't kill it right away, then they suck. Like that's the nature of the beast here to a certain degree. And so I was glad that people are kind of like tempering their expectations about like what they can expect from him offensively. And to say that 60% of people in this random poll think that he will post a WRC plus below 90 and maybe still be content with that, I think I think it's the fan base maturing a little bit. You know?
Got some good followers. Can I borrow some of your followers? I get so much hate for this for the dumbest reason. I'm not going to go into it or whatever. But to your point, the WRC plus, Nick Magical, to compare, career WRC plus for the Cubs, just under 80, right? So if Vasquez can provide 80 with more defensive value in the middle infield, that's exactly what I'm asking for. I'm not going to get heated up over should they call Vasquez and demote Magical and Matrimony, because in reality, these are negligent differences, to be frank. That's my new thing, by the way. I say to be frank because Career Council.
Smart.
But
smart guys say that.
Yeah, I apparently. Yeah. But it's still one of those discussions that I want to see someone who has high extreme outcomes. That's always the key phrase, high extremes. The power, 20 plus home runs last year, plus defense, that's always going to intrigue me. So I'm always going to default for those guys who have those unique traits in combination.
Yeah. All right, let's go Owen Casey. We got to talk about Owen Casey, because with Brennan Davis's hot streak, we've kind of not been talking about Owen quite as much, and he deserves it, because Owen Casey this season has just been tremendous, and he's been staying consistently good the entire year long. 5 years younger than the average player in the International League, which is
what's his
crazy.
bash?
He is bashing 135 this year, which is the second best in the organization. It is
Rojas first.
Third best. First is Moises Ballesteros. Let me sort this real quick. First place is Moises Ballesteros. Second is actually Christian Hernandez.
Get out of here.
And then at 136, Christian Hernandez has a 761 OPS, which is not like crazy good, but he is younger than league average. And he's playing in Myrtle Beach. He's playing in the Carolina League. He's playing
that's so good to see. Good for him, man. He's walking.
Yeah.
He's walking at a 12% clip.
He's walking. Right. He's looked pretty impressive. And then Owen Casey is third with a 135 bash.
Where's Rojas on there? Sorry to detract. I'm just
Rojas has been weird. I've gotten that question from a lot of people. Rojas is lower than right now. He's at a 104 bash, and so I need to look a little bit. I mean, right now his Rojas's OPS is 664.
Oh yeah, he's not slugging right now.
He's not slugging this year.
Everything else looks fine though.
Everything else looks pretty decent. Yeah. If you guys want more information on Jefferson Rojas, go check out our last episode where Brian and I broke down Matt Mervis and Jefferson Rojas in
He's gonna be fine.
absurd
His
detail.
strikeout rate is 15%.
Strikeout rate's
Batting average is fine.
15%,
Yeah,
and
he'll be fine.
it's really just the offense in the Midwest League, 701 league-wide OPS, and he's just below average on that. So like, yeah, it's really just a slug for Rojas.
But sorry to distract.
All good.
Back to Caissie.
Owen Caissie this season, it's the thing that maybe has stood out the most to me is that he's continuing to walk more and more every single year. Owen Caissie's been a guy that's always walked a ton, and every year he's been well above league average. This year he's walking almost 18% of his plate appearances. That's good for insane. A 153 walk percentage plus, which compares it to league average. He has been, and then the thing that really stands out that I want to talk to you about is his ability to use the whole field, right? Yep. So that's what he has done since his time in Myrtle Beach. He's done that his entire pro career, and it's what stood out the most. If you go back and listen to the first, probably if you go back and listen to me with Jimmy Nelligan on Growing Cubs, we talked.
How's Jimmy these days?
Jimmy is always a stud forever. Yeah. I posted the picture of Frankie Scalzo, and he liked that because that's up right up his alley.
I want to do a pod with Jimmy and you one day.
Oh, that'd be good. That would be good. That would be good. But yeah, so we talked about Owen Caissie using the entire field for a long time, and so he's continued to do that this year. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and pull up. I have, for those of you guys watching on, I'm gonna pull a Brendan Miller here. I'm gonna pull up a chart.
You're gonna pull up a graph. Oh
yeah, I'm gonna pull up his spray chart.
Look at you.
And so if you guys are watching on YouTube, you should be able to see this. If you're listening on audio, that's totally fine. We're gonna describe it anyways. It's just a little extra feature here.
I love this.
Let me. Oh, hold on. Let me pull this up. I'm not as good as you. All right. So you should be able to see that on your screen now. This is Owen Caissie's spray chart. Basically, it's showing that he uses the entire field.
That's crazy.
He actually is pulling the ball in the air not very often at all. So he's got one home run to the right side, to right field. The flyouts are just not. There's no fielding outs in right field. There's one in deep right center. There's a couple in shallow that were basically caught by the second baseman. But besides that, he has had 0 flyouts to right field the entire year long, which is a crazy stat to think about. Owen Caissie is not tapping into his pull side power yet this year, and I think that's fine. Like, he's still just 21 years old. He is proving that in AAA he can continue to use the entire field. He will at some point get to the point where he is pulling the ball in the air. We're still waiting on that. We know he posts crazy exit velos. We know he has crazy raw power. But you know what? The Cubs are really in no rush to develop him quickly in terms of knowing the depth that there is at the major league level in the outfield, understanding that he's still just 21 years old, understanding that he's in his first year at the AAA level. There's no reason to say, oh, you're up to AAA. Let's now work on instituting that pull side power. It's like, hey, let's continue to watch you do your thing, post higher batting averages than you would expect considering his strikeout rate, and hit the ball all across the field.
The question when I see this is, can he pull the ball with power if the intention is to do that? Because something like this obviously looks like an intentional approach where he's attempting to go center to left field on the opposite pull side.
See, I think it's his natural. I think it's his natural approach.
So you think this is not just like an intentional thing?
I don't think. No, I think this is something that he's done throughout his career, and I think that maybe it started one day as a like, let me try hard to go to left center. But I think this is how he hits now. His ability to go to the opposite way, in the air and on the line is important. You look at this spray chart. He is pulling the ball on the ground quite a bit, but it's not like he's only pulling the ball on the ground. He's going the opposite way on the ground too. So I think this is his natural thing, and he needs to eventually do the unnatural thing to pull the ball in the air.
This reminds me of the discussion we had with Matt Chapman. I don't have Matt Chapman's spray chart, but the similarity is that Chapman is not a pull-heavy guy. The reason that Chapman came to mind is because we were contrasting him and Bellinger going into the offseason. And the contrast was Bellinger's expected weight on base average versus Chapman's expected weight on base average. And if you were to compare the two back in November and December, Chapman actually had a higher expected weight on base average than Bellinger. The difference was that Bellinger pulls a lot of baseballs. Whereas for Chapman, he tends to go up the middle way more.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at his spray chart, in my memory, a lot of those home runs and doubles you're seeing right here from Casey towards center field is kind of what you saw from Matt Chapman. So when I bring up this point, the question for me comes, well, how are Major League defenses going to defend against Owen Casey? Because Chapman, for the past couple of years, he's produced value below his expected rates. So for me, I'm wondering if there's a prompt for Casey to pull the ball more with intention, tap into some of those natural physical advantages that he has. Can he do it? At the same time, is it even necessary? Can he still provide his optimal offensive value with a spray chart like this? Because counterintuitively, you know how it is. You and I were talking growing up, go up the middle, go opposite field. In reality, for guys, including Cody Bellinger, you get more base hits when you pull the ball with weaker contact. If you mishit the ball to the pull side, you have a better chance of getting the base hit than if you mishit the ball up the middle or to the opposite side. That's just kind of how it is for reasons that are not quite understood well.
Yeah,
so,
but looking at Casey, like I has Cody Bellinger ever been one of those guys that's posted exit velo numbers like Owen Casey, right? Like Owen Casey is like consistently like top of like major league talents in terms of hitting the ball hard.
It's the same thing with Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman was exit velo. All of the stuff you want to see on Baseball Savant with the redness, that was Matt Chapman. But he's posting numbers at average to below average, and this year so far is well below league average. It's not to say that that's going to be a bad thing for Casey whatsoever. It just gets the thoughts going, right? You start trying to find examples in recent memory, and that's one of the examples just because of bias we were talking about. I'm sure there's other examples as well. That's why I was asking you, like, this is great to see, and I think if you were to ask me, okay, make me the perfect baseball player, I would want someone with the capacity to go to the opposite field, up the middle, and to the pull side. That's what Joey Votto talked about all the time. If Joey Votto used to say, if you can put the ball where you want to put the ball, that's the mark of a good hitter. When you look at a spray chart like this, it appears as if Owen Casey is one of those guys. It's just, if I want to maximize his value, then the question for me is going to be, okay, can he go to the pull side if the intention is there? And is that going to be a necessity to reach that peak value? I'm not sure the answer to that.
I will say that from a not looking at numbers, not looking at spray charts, it's easier to teach a guy to pull the ball going from spraying the ball than to take a guy that's pull only and say, oh, you need to use the whole field. It's way easier going that way.
Isn't Matt Mervis a heavy pull guy?
Matt Mervis is a heavy pull guy.
Okay, so I mean, you can find examples on both sides where maybe Matt Mervis, I don't know, you've seen Matt Mervis more than I have, but maybe Matt Mervis needs to actually use most of the field rather than being a heavy pull guy because of some underlying mechanical things. I'm not sure.
I guess the point with all this is that Owen Casey has yet to be putting up the home run slug that we know we can hit the ball hard as hell. So why are the home run numbers not coming? It's this. It's he's not pulling the ball in the air where you get most of your home runs. Now you look at it, right? He's got this graph that I'm showing on YouTube right now is overlaid over Wrigley Field right now, and he does have the long home run to right field. He also has a couple doubles that would be out at Wrigley to the left center gap and the right center gap, and then his two other home runs. He has 3 home runs this year. One is deep pull side, and the other 2 are dead center field, and that describes Owen Casey. If he's able to pull some more of those turn from doubles and long flyouts to home runs pretty easily.
Hold on. I want to show you this. Can I show a chart here? Is that even possible? Because I'm not.
Do you have a share? Do you have a share option?
Oh boy. Let me see how I can do this. 1 second. Okay, there's the charts.
Okay.
Now present.
You might have the option to. I think you do.
I think I do. Okay. Can you see this?
I got it right here.
Okay. So this is Matt Chapman.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if you go to his Baseball Savant page, you're going to see his bat speed, 97th percentile, average exit velo is right now in the 90th percentile. Last year was 98th. And Matt Chapman is having, career worst numbers to start the season. Yeah. But you're seeing from the right side, a lot of base hits up the middle. I'm not showing the outs, but a lot of base hits to the opposite field as well. It's a very even mixed
It looks
spray
a
chart.
lot like Owen Caisie's spray chart.
It does. And it's not to compare the two. I'm sure there's other
Yes.
examples, but this is the only thing that comes to mind.
Yes.
And you brought up the slug and the power. People wonder, why isn't Matt Chapman hitting more home runs either? And I wondered the same thing.
Now, to wrap this up, I think that before we see Owen Caissie in Chicago, he will be displaying more pull side power in Iowa. I think that's the next hurdle. That's the next developmental challenge. And I can't imagine the Cubs are going to call him up having not shown that ability to do that quite yet. Yeah. It'd be shocking to me.
Was he 21 years old?
21 years old. Yeah.
I mean, what he's doing is phenomenal.
Yeah.
The ability to go multiple sides of the field with high exit velo at that age while walking consistently throughout his minor league development, those are foundational traits you want every player to have. Now it's about molding it and maximizing those natural advantages to maybe, in this case, hit more home runs.
Dude, we're talking about all this, and he has the what I say the third best bash in the organization. Yeah. He's putting up an OPS of 855. Like, he has been tremendous this year, and he's scratching the surface of what he can be.
See, this is crazy to me. It's good to talk about stuff like this too, because we just talked about Luis Vazquez, right? So as a matter of expectations, when we talk about Owen Casey, these nuanced critiques are because my expectation for him is one of those high potential offensive producers. So I want him to see that potential and that 90th percentile type offensive production. Whereas for Vasquez, I just want him to be slightly above replacement level. That's my expectation. So when we critique Owen Casey and the pull side power and all this, it's because my expectation for him is being an all-star hitter.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. All right, let's go. Speaking of an all-star caliber player, let's talk about Cade Horton, because he's been up in Iowa. He has now made 2 starts for the Iowa Cubs, and the most recent he's made 3 starts for the Iowa Cubs. His most recent start was actually really, really impressive, I thought. So I don't have the line pulled up in front of me right now, but he went 5 innings and gave up 3 runs. And you look at that, and I pointed this out on Twitter. I said, do not stat line scout this performance, because you look at 5 innings, 3 runs, and you're like, that's not great, But Cade Horton was phenomenal over the course of that start. The first 4 innings, he was terrific. He was showing the fastball at a higher velocity. The slider he was using whenever he wanted to. He was dropping that changeup every once in a while as well. I thought Cade Horton looked absolutely terrific in the first 4 innings. The 5th inning rolled around, and then he just got dinked and dunked the entire inning, right? Where he did not give up a single hit or a single run scoring event, even a sac fly or anything, with an exit velo greater than 85 miles an hour. Like, he was doing everything he needed to. The balls were just kind of falling and finding weird holes. There was one he gave up. It was a hit to, I believe it was to Trace Thompson, former Cub Trace Thompson, where the ball was hit like over the first baseman's head. It probably didn't get much more than 50 feet in the air, and it had an exit velo of like 40 miles an hour, and it just plopped on the outfield grass, like 2 feet outside of the infield dirt, and just stopped there because it didn't have any velocity. It didn't keep rolling. It just plopped. And it was funny. A hit. It's like, it was stuff like that. So like, Cade Horton's outing was terrific. And like I mentioned, the velo seemed to be back a little bit. So what have you seen from Cade Horton's fastball in terms of StatCast numbers?
It's very reminiscent of what you see from Justin Steele. If you look at Justin Steele's glove side, arm side, or arm run, so how much cut it has, I guess a better way of describing this. Steele hangs out between 1/2 inch to 2 inches of cut with his fastball. The unique trait, which you guys have talked about exhaustively for a year and a half now, is that Steele has the ability to present some relative carry for pitches that cut that much. So for Steele, that's been his trademark pitch. For Cade Horton, the shape looks very similar from a right-handed perspective. The numbers are almost identical. So from glove side run or cutting movement from Horton, same range, about 0 to 2 inches of cutting action, and his carry is between 12 to 14 inches. It's almost a mirror of Justin Steele. Now, what does that mean for a righty and a release point and the velocity intertwined with that? because we do have some recent history of Justin Steele, who averages 91, 92, 93 in a game basis. Horton seems to be around that territory, if not even higher at his peak. Seems quite encouraging. Now, unlike Steele, you have Horton with multiple diverse pitch types. So he can go heavy breaker, he can go changeup, as you just mentioned right there. The ability for Horton to adapt to certain pitch types as he needs to is more of a realistic scenario than it has been for Justin Steele over the past couple of years. As a result, you have a higher ceiling than Justin Steele, as crazy as that sounds. For me, when he was debuting in Iowa, I don't know the reasons for it. You're watching him. I'm not watching every single inning, but I have been surprised by just some of the walks. It's a 3-game, whatever it is thing. And the velocity being 91-ish or so, I guess it does kind of make you think why is that going on? Not to draw concerns, but just prompt some questions.
Yeah, it's good to hear that the fastball qualities are that impressive because I know, me included, but a lot of people were worried about that velo when he got called up to Iowa, sitting in the low 90s, as opposed to sitting in he had been in college and his time last year and his time this year, according to whatever velo readings were being shown in Tennessee. It was basically mid 90s is what he was sitting, and then he would touch high 90s every once in a while.
Is it possible? I don't know the developmental timeline, but have they changed anything with his fastball shape?
I don't know. I think that fastball shape has kind of been a concern. I know that Brian has been one to kind of point that out throughout the last couple of years. Is like, yeah, he is a cut ride type guy in terms of that fastball quality, but like it seemed not Justin Steele quality, right? It seemed like it wasn't that good of a pitch quality as Justin Steele. So I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued by this and going to keep watching this throughout this season and when he ultimately makes it up to Chicago, I'm sure. But that's worth keeping an eye on because if you're looking at comparing his fastball to Justin Steele's, if he can keep with that cut ride movement on his fastball, but also get back to being in the mid 90s with the fastball, and that's a better, in theory, right? That's a better offering than what Justin Steele brings to the table. And we know how much we love Justin Steele's fastball. If you keep going on that and comparing it to Justin Steele's go-to pitch is the slider. It's a very, very good slider. Cade Horton's go-to pitch is the slider. Very, very good slider. And I'd argue that it has the potential to be an even better pitch than what Justin Steele's slider is at the major league level right now. All right, there you go. You're comparing two guys. Steele was a Cy Young candidate last year. Cut ride fastball slider mix. Cade Horton is a prospect with the cut ride fastball slider mix, and he also drops a few more changeups and curveballs than what Justin Steele does.
So a little bit more diversity.
Exactly. So the big thing is you mentioned the command, and he has walked more guys. We've pointed this out on the show in the past couple of weeks that like it's weird. It's weird that he's walking as many guys as he is, considering that he'd walked like 3 guys all year in Tennessee. So that's something to keep an eye on. I have noticed a few pitches that are high in the zone fastballs that have not been called for strikes, which is kind of the theme of working with the automatic ball strike system at the AAA level. It's like getting those high fastballs.
Are the baseballs the same? Wasn't there a baseball thing last year where like they changed the baseballs or whatever?
I don't have the update on the baseballs in the minor leagues, but I will say,
I'm pulling for something over here.
I mean, the league-wide OPS in the International League is, like I said, 769. League-wide OPS in the Southern League, where Tennessee is 649.
I'm just going to say that baseballs are different just to give myself peace of mind.
Dude, it is crazy. 120 points higher league-wide OPS in AAA than AA.
Is it always
Something's
like that?
going on.
Is it always like that?
No.
All right, the baseballs are different. That's what I'm going with. They're attacking them differently, or they're making them differently.
It's always higher in AAA, but not that. That's a ridiculous. The OPS league wide is lower in the Southern League than the Carolina League this year. And where we talk about all the time about how it's like ridiculous you can't hit in the Carolina League. So I don't know what's going on. It's got to be the baseballs. So I don't know.
That's my conspiracy theory. Is it's the baseballs. Well, one brief thing about the fastball shape. The because I know, Brian's been talking about like Porter Hodge's cut right fastball,
Yeah,
and we're trying to find different reference marks to compare these guys to. They don't really exist. So comparing fastball shapes with cut right profiles, there's few guys who have this type of
hmm
evidence. So when we compare Horton to Justin Steele, yeah, Justin Steele might have a little bit more ride on that
hmm
fastball. And from a lefty perspective, it actually might be more advantageous because you're going against more righties. I'm
true.
not sure. But I think what I've learned over the years, especially when I look at Javier Assad and a lot of these pitchers, is that I and all of us as fans, we need to understand how these like stuff models work
hmm
and what they are trying to predict. And for stuff models, from like a statistical perspective, the input is a large population of pitchers who are within a very defined range of metrics, whether it be release point or horizontal break or vertical break. And so when you put all that input into the computer, of course, it's going to bias against the majority of pitchers.
hmm
Now, there's going to be certain pitchers like Steele and Horton, Jose Cuas on the other end, Scott Efros on the other end from years back. They don't fall within that distribution. And so when the computers are trying to find the best predictive accuracies, of course, they're not going to weigh those guys heavily because they don't make up the majority of pitchers.
Yeah.
That means when I compare Horton to Justin Steele and I see, a 2-inch difference in ride, is that meaningful? I do not know. Is that meaningful for a right-handed batter? I do not know. The best reference is results. And over the
Yep.
course of Horton's development, walks are low, strikeouts are high, runs are low. So to me, it suggests that the fastball is going to play up, even if it doesn't look like Justin Steele's best fastball, although it is pretty close from a numbers perspective.
Yeah. At the very least, very, very least, the slider has looked gross. And we know we can debate the fastball, how legit is it, all that good stuff. He's got an incredible slider. He's had that since he was drafted, and it seems to be getting better. He got some crazy swords in his last outing. It's gross, dude. It's a gross,
Yeah.
gross pitch. So, you mentioned Porter Hodge. I want to run through real quick. There was some movement as far as relievers being promoted this past week. And I don't want to get into super detail about any of these guys, but I want to mention all of them and just kind of talk about them as a whole. We saw Porter Hodge get promoted up to Chicago on Friday. He was promoted. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him today on Sunday going. So if you guys are listening, I'm sure we see him pitch today. But he threw on Thursday. He threw on Thursday for Iowa, so he got promoted. That was kind of weird. He got promoted and he wasn't going to throw on Friday, but very clearly pulled up as a necessity out of the bullpen is Porter Hodge. Zach Lee and Eduardo Nunez were both promoted from Tennessee up to AAA Iowa. Eduardo Nunez already got some playing time, so he threw an inning for Iowa this past weekend. And then Ethan Roberts is back
Nice.
to a certain degree, which
That's
is
awesome.
terrific. He got promoted from he was down in Mesa rehabbing. He got called up to Tennessee. He threw, I don't even think it was a full inning. It might have been a full inning. He threw one outing in Tennessee and then immediately got promoted up to Iowa. I hope that he enjoyed his time in Kodak, his very short amount of time, because he got promoted up to AAA Iowa. So we got Lee, Nunez, and Ethan Roberts up in Iowa, just a call away from Chicago, and Porter Hodge there. Anything that stand out for you and those guys, knowing the current status of the Cubs Major League bullpen?
If you like stuff, Brian Smith pointed this out. He's the stuffed darling of the Cubs system, Porter Hodge. Of course, I like stuff. I want to see how that plays up. The command with Hodge, the high walk rate, what is it, 8 or 9 batters per game or something like that. The Cubs and their prospects and relief depth walk rate is such a question mark. I don't know if this is still true today, but I think like a week ago, the organization is highest in walk per 9 rate in all organizations across every level when you just combine everything. So for the Cubs, there appears to have been, over the course of the last 2-3 years, a high emphasis on bringing in stuff guys at the risk of command. We'll see if that pays dividends or not, and they can fine tune some of that command. But Porter Hodge seems to be representative of the Cubs system to that regard.
Yeah.
The Cubs state of the bullpen, it sucks. I hate seeing it. You go into the year and you kind of mentally slot in Julian Merriweather in the 8th inning, Alzolay in the 9th inning, and Neris as one of those bridges between 7, 8, and 9. It has not happened. I do think the potential for that to stabilize is still there. Mark Leiter Jr. has been better than what we may have expected because of the September reversion last year. So that's been great to see. I'm fascinated by Tyson Miller, although the counter to that, he does not have a track record of long-term success. Remains to be seen if he can do that deep into September. Jose Cuas is back up. He has major league innings. The stuff is always there. Neris has looked better in the last 2 outings. Keegan Thompson has exceeded my expectations, believe it or not. That's great to see. And then you hope that once you get fully healthy in the rotation, once Jordan Wicks comes back and you can kind of maneuver your rotation and define roles with Hayden Wesneski and Ben Brown come post-trade deadline, I actually think there's a good reason to believe the bullpen's going to be fine. It's just how you maneuver things from May, June to the trade deadline to make it through this rough stretch. Ultimately, they're going to have to make a trade to get one of those shut down closers because the next 6-8 weeks is not going to be enough evidence to make me believe, and I imagine front office believe, that there won't be potential issues in September again. The way you get beyond that is you go out and make a trade.
Yeah, Porter Hodge is not the 9th inning. He's not the closer of this team's playoff run. Neither is Zach Lee. Neither is Eduardo Nunez. Neither is Ethan Robert. Like those guys, I think that each of them could make an impact in Chicago out of the bullpen. And I've been saying this since the past offseason with some of these guys. You can throw in Frankie Scalzo Jr. into this mix. You can throw in...
I would love to see him up this year.
Yeah. I mean, you can even throw in like Jake Reindl. I think that he just came off the IL. Different scenario, obviously. But all these guys could impact Chicago. The problem is that none of these guys in year one at the major league level are going to be your closer or your fireman out of the bullpen or anything like that. Now, I posted as soon as Porter Hodge got the call up, I posted that like Luke Little and like Daniel Palencia, you're going to have to be patient because he's going to have some innings or some outings where he blows up, right?
Yeah.
He's going to have some outings where it's not pretty, where he can't find the zone. He just can't find the zone. We've seen that with Luke Little this season. But he's going to have some outings where he looks terrific.
He looks like the best arm in the bullpen at times.
If you look at his numbers over the course of the entire season, the numbers are going to be there. The numbers are going to get there. I don't know this first season in Chicago, but like over the course of the season, the numbers are going to be fine. But it's just going to be kind of a wild ride from outing to outing. And I know that's not what Cubs fans necessarily want to hear, but that's how it works with a guy who sometimes doesn't find the zone as much as you want to see him. Porter Hodge, again, like Luke Little and like Daniel Palencia, he's new to the bullpen. This is his first full season working as a reliever. So like this is all new to him. He is a big dude. He is an athlete, but like sometimes he loses his release point because he's just a big, long, lanky dude. He's going to be fun to watch in Chicago. He's going to light up Pitching Ninja. Pitching Ninja is going to have a heyday with him. But the thing is, you're gonna look at him on Pitching Ninja on the occasion. You're gonna look at him on Pitching Ninja. It's like, oh, look at this nasty sword, and then you look at his line for the day, and it's gonna be like he gave up 2 runs on 4 walks.
So
it's like,
oh my God, I'm forgetting his name. Dylan Maples.
Maples,
yeah.
And maybe not that extreme. I don't know. Maybe not that extreme. But it's. I guess my advice to and people listening to the show know how I feel about Porter Hodge and all these guys. Zach Lee is the same way. Eduardo Nunez is the same way too. Ethan Roberts is different, but the other 3 are the same way. Is like enjoy them, enjoy the nastiness, enjoy what they can do, enjoy if they really put it all together, like what they can be. They're putting up all these guys are putting up great numbers in the minor leagues. Let's just wait for them to get up to Chicago like Porter Hodge and see what they can do up there and how it translates both this year and next year, the year after that. So there's plenty of time to get used to the stuff that they have and enjoy it.
I have a question for you. So you've seen Daniel Palencia develop, and to be honest, you put him on my radar when you were talking about him. What was it, a year and a half ago?
Probably,
maybe longer than
a
that
little bit
now.
more than that.
Yeah. So his development has been so interesting because last season for me, when he was called up, one, it surprised me on the timing that he was called up, but two, his outing to outing difference were so stark. In one outing, the fastball was all he threw.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a different outing, not start, but a different outing, the fastball command was completely gone. And then the slider was relied upon. There was one outing in 2023. I think he threw 14 straight fastballs, which is crazy. This year, he's throwing more sinkers.
Mm-hmm.
He developed a splitter,
Yeah.
and he's throwing 4 pitch types.
Yeah.
And the K per 9 in Iowa was absurd. And it's just, he's one of those guys whose stuff is remarkable. And when we talk about like, you know, the 1% outcome, like he is that closer type guy.
Well, I think that Palencia, Little, Porter Hodge, those are all like, if you're looking for a big outcome type guy, they haven't figured out in the bullpen. Like they know what they're doing in the bullpen. You got the Hector Neris is fine. You got I think the Keegan Thompson is probably kind of more in the same, cut from the same cloth as Hector Neris. We're like,
yeah, I agree.
You just kind of want him to be good. You're not hoping for closer. And honestly, to a certain degree, Albert Alzolay is the same way as Neris and Keegan Thompson. Versus Merriweather is higher outcome, like a wider range of outcomes.
Yep.
But Little, Palencia, Porter Hodge, these guys are what you're looking for. They're right up your alley, dude.
Yeah. I sorry, my brain was spinning over here, and I'm thinking with Daniel Palencia, I don't think it's ever going to happen, but you and I had these conversations about Palencia as a starting pitcher, and it's not going to happen. But when I see 4 pitch types from Palencia, sinker, four-seamer, splitter, and slider, it's like, you know, it's kind of interesting. But the command is such a challenge for him right now that he seems destined for late inning relief.
You know what's interesting is that like with these guys like Hodge, Little, Palencia, I think that because they're relievers, if they struggle over the course of a month or they struggle over the course of whatever, I think the fans are much quicker to say, get them out of here. Get whether it's send them back to AAA or like DFA them, trade them, do whatever. And I think it's really interesting because like these 3 guys were a year ago. Yeah, a little over a year ago for Little and Palencia were starting pitchers. So if you're looking, if they would be struggling, now they're not, this is a different scenario, but if they were struggling over the course of a month in the Chicago rotation, you would not be saying like DFA these dudes. You'd be saying they're still a top prospect. They're still a top prospect in this organization. Hopefully they can figure this out because I still believe in them. They're a top prospect for a reason. Now, all 3 of these guys were top 20 prospects in the organization still as relievers. So like to give up on them after they struggle for a month it seems just so premature and like so it's happening only because they're relief pitchers, not starting pitchers.
Yeah. If they can develop and fine-tune their command, similar to how Wisniewski over the course of this year has improved his command, which is, to his words, the explanation for his success, then my God, the ceiling for those guys is truly 8th, 9th inning for both Little and Palencia. It's just a matter of to what degree can you expect the walk rate to lower? Is it going to be by 1 batter per 9 innings? Is it going to be, you know, in the mark of the elite relievers with high stuff or under 3? I'm not sure. I don't think you can be confident either way. And between now and the trade deadline, I don't think that's enough room for the front office to feel comfortable before ultimately making a decision to trade for someone. But I can still easily see a situation, because of the high volume of guys we're talking about and health returning, that the bullpen's going to be fine. Now, these are famous last words. You can flip this and say I'm an idiot or whatever, which is totally fine. But that has been the strategy from the front office. High volume, high stuff, guys. Roll the dice. Hopefully they fall your way and you have a good bullpen by September.
I think this is a perfect opportunity for me to address the question that I receive on a daily basis, which is what Cubs prospects are going to be traded for Mason Miller? And my answer is I have no idea. It's more than you want. It's more than you want to give up for Mason Miller. I don't want to belabor this point because I truly don't know. I don't know how to value a guy who was a top starting pitcher prospect a year ago and is now the best reliever in all of baseball. But 4 years ago, he had like a 7.5 ERA in D2 or D3 baseball, right? Like I don't know. And he was throwing like 4 years ago, he was throwing like 91 miles an hour, and now he's throwing 103. I don't know. How do you value a guy like that? Is his arm going to fall off? I don't know how to value Mason Miller, and so I don't know how other teams could possibly put together a trade package that makes sense in their mind. Uh, there would be I would assume at least one of like the Owen Casey, Kevin Alcantara, throw in a James Trial. Like it would be too much than you'd be willing to give up, I would assume. And I just wanted to kind of insert that because I get that question so much. I wanted to insert that comment that I don't know.
I would be surprised if Jed does make that deal because it goes against his low risk nature on trades and signings. And Mason Miller is the most extreme, weird player out there. And because of the team control years and the Cubs' willingness or lack thereof to hold on to their prospects and trade for guys, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I can understand that. He's as crazy as that might sound. They still need a reliever, though, even if it's not Mason Miller, if this continues to happen.
Exactly. Let's stick on. We were talking about Little and Palencia. Let's stick on and wrap up the show by talking about the other guys I mentioned at the top of the show, the young guys in Chicago, the guys that you've had your eyes on quite a bit this season because they started off as prospects, but now I think all the guys we're talking about today, PCA, for those of you guys out there listening, has graduated from prospect status. So
Congrats.
I mean, if he gets sent back to AAA, we'll keep talking about him. But really, like there's going to be less PCA chatter on this podcast, unfortunately, because you and Corey get to talk about him a lot more. I'm lucky
happy.
You. Yeah,
we've stolen PCA from you guys.
You have, yeah. So let's talk about these young guys that were prospects to begin the year that are no longer. I think let's start off by talking about PCA because PCA is, we hinted at it already. Like he is performing so much better at the major league level than we expected, and so much better than he was in AAA. And it's awesome. It's awesome to see.
PCA has exceeded my expectations. I know by going to his Fangraphs page and seeing the offensive production, it might be underwhelming at first, but the surprising feature of PCA is that the plate discipline is so much different in a good way than what he was showing in Iowa. When he was called up a few weeks ago, he was called up with a whiff rate of 27%. I was apprehensive about his offensive potential because of the lack of power that is with that 73% contact rate. To orient expectations, Dansby Swanson has around a 71 to 73% contact rate, but Dansby's home run potential is 20 to upwards to over 25 home runs. That means for PCA, he would have to, at some point with that contact rate, show similar power output, which may not be there for his current development. Now, with the big league club, he's making almost 80% contact. I'm like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And it's one of those surprising adjustments that is reminiscent of what we saw from Morel when he was debuting. When Morel debuted, he was chasing that under 20% pitches, batting leadoff in 2022. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I didn't expect any of this from Morel whatsoever.
Yeah.
I bring up the comparison because those are exactly the traits from when I watch guys graduate in minor leaguers. I want to see the players who just don't make quite sense. In PCA right now, I got to say, I'll be perfectly honest with you, because of the high whiffs and the moderate power, I was probably lower than most on PCA's offensive output. Now, because he's showing this unpredictable improvement at this age, at the big league level in this context. It is beyond impressive. I am so impressed with what he's doing. And the defense is just absolutely spectacular. And the speed he's the fastest player in professional baseball.
Yeah.
So my projection or interest in PCA, no hyperbole, has significantly enhanced just because of like the 60, 70 plate appearance sample where he's showing this incredible adjustment in the ability to make contact.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked with you a lot about Christopher Morel and how this happened with Christopher Morel. And you're right. The PCA situation is right on the same track. Much smaller sample size, obviously. Like, well, let's pump the brakes to a certain degree, but like he just I don't know. It's
the blips. It's the blips, right?
Yeah.
Like there's players who are so like static, and then there's some weird players who are like, oh, they do this crazy thing, and he's one of those guys.
I mean, is it something where like he's on the bigger stage? You know, he's on the bigger stage, and something just flips a switch where he's like, I'm at the major league level. I perform better. I lock in more. Like something that there no baseball savant page could fulfill that explanation.
And it makes sense.
He's got that dog
right?
in him.
It makes sense. Like Morel's the same guy. It's like I envy those players so much. Like they are completely immune to the yips. And in fact, it's the complete opposite. It's where, like you said, when the environment stress is high, they lock in. It's like, those are such good baseball players to have. I love those players. And I never thought about it like that. Like I always thought maybe they were just doing something with Dustin Kelly when he was called up, but maybe it's just he's a crazy psychological baseball player where he locks in when the bigs are there and the lights are on.
His slider on StatCast for dog in him is 99.
Is 99.
Bright red. It's bright
red.
Yeah.
Bright red.
Let's talk about Alexander Canario. Again, we hinted at him earlier. I want to dig in a little bit deeper here because he is obviously, so he's back in AAA, and he spent some time in Chicago. I kind of hinted at the fact that I wasn't too keen on how he was used in Chicago during his time there. What are your thoughts on his performance at the big league level this year?
Council has his hands tied on playing time. Like you want to give guys like Canario, who have the extreme offensive outputs, as many chances to succeed as possible. But it's a challenge to make it work with trying to win games right now. I went to batting practice in San Diego when they were out here, and Canario had just been called up. And he was batting with the group of Nico and Dansby. I remember watching him. I'm sorry, this is back in Arizona. I remember watching him. I'm like, what? Like his batting practice, Greg? I don't know if you've seen this before.
Yeah.
Spectacular. Moonshots.
It's not, I mean, it's the distance, but it's also the height.
Dude, it is. There are some baseball players. I brought my dad to the game. Okay. And my dad is very familiar with baseball, but he doesn't watch like the minor leaguers like you and I do. But we're watching batting practice, and he knows like Nico and Dansby and all these guys.
Yeah.
And then Canario goes into the cage, and he turns to me like, "Who is that?" Right. So he's one of those players that even like the casual fans, they see as unique. The bat speed metrics came out. We're all hyped about the bat speed and the swing length metrics. He's top 10 in Major League Baseball, Canario, with bat speed. So of course that kind of makes you think, okay, well, you know, the athleticism is aligning with some of those raw numbers. I'm fascinated. It's just one of those situations where are the Cubs seeing his value in the form of offense for this roster, or are they seeing the value in the same way they saw Nelson Velasquez's value? And the value is we don't know we can give this guy playing time and reach that peak performance, even though he is good, but we have this gaping void in our bullpen that we need to address. And is he best served in a trade versus giving consistent plate appearances too?
Yeah, I mean, the Nelson Velasquez comparisons are they're too spot on not to point out, because when both of those guys were in the minor leagues, I described Alexander Canario as just a better version of exactly what Nelson Velasquez is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of played out that way to a certain degree throughout their career. Like as the years have gone by, I probably said that back at like it was soon after Canario was acquired, and I think it's kind of continued to play out that way to a certain degree. I want to point out something that you and Corey said on one of your most recent shows. You were kind of talking about the value or the trade value and how you acquire a reliever, and how the Nelson Velasquez trade last year really set a precedent in terms of how you value a non-top 10 prospect in the organization, not on all of baseball, in the organization that's already on the 40-man roster and what they return in a trade, right? So with Nelson Velasquez last year, he was somewhere between 10 and 20 on prospect lists. You trade him away. He was already the major league level. He was already in the 40-man roster, and you get Jose Cuas back, which you can debate that all you want. Actually, Nelson Velasquez has not been performing super well with Kansas City at the major league level. I think a sub 700 OPS. Alexander Canario, Matt Mervis, Luis Vazquez, are they really all that different than what we saw from Nelson Velasquez last year in terms of trade value? Because you look at those three guys, and those three guys might be the names that are thrown out the most often in terms of, I think probably with James Triantos, but I think that the names Canario, Mervis, Luis Vazquez get thrown out most often in terms of guys that will be traded away for major league help at this deadline. I mean, do you trade those guys away for another Jose Cuas?
Jose Cuas, it's not just the 1 year value. He has 1 year of service time, and he has the unique features that make pitching developers think, that's interesting. So Cuas was a guy who had 65 innings last year. He has 6 years of team control, unique release point. They changed the slider shape from a north to south to a sweeper. And you give up Nelson Velasquez, who has same service time numbers as Jose Cuas. You can debate whether that was a good idea or not, but what's undeniable is that the potential for Jose Cuas to be, 5+ year reliever contributor in a time in which the Cubs needed bullpen help was pretty obvious that it made some sense, even though if you didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
There might be a scenario where the same thing happens in July. Mervis, Vasquez, Canario. I don't know how I feel about it. It's one of those situations where, in hindsight, you may have hoped that those trades were explored in the offseason to shore up some holes on the roster. That way, you don't get to this point where you have to trade relievers for relievers. Instead, you can use those guys to trade for other types of pitchers, whether it be, starting pitching prospects, whatever. Point being is that they will have to make decisions, and you can't just hold on to Mervis and Vasquez and Canario and stall their development and ultimately decrease the return you get. And their peak return might be in the form of a Jose Cuas multi-controlled, volatile pitcher with a high ceiling.
Yeah, that development is the big word there for me. That is, like last year, I think that everybody, all Cubs fans seem to realize that it seemed like the Royals got back more with Velasquez than the Cubs got back for Jose Cuas, but everybody was still okay with that, considering this, like the Cubs just needed relief help, and it kind of made sense with the roster construction. My issue, and the thing that the most difficult for me to stomach with these types of players, Velasquez, Mervis, Vasquez, and Canario, is that the Cubs have done such a good job in developing these players to be 40-man rosterable players, right? Nelson Velasquez was a guy that always showed a ton of pop, and like he just could, like he showed pop, he showed athleticism, he needed to put it all together. The Cubs developed him to a point where he did put it all together, and then you trade him for a reliever. You got Luis Vazquez, where he spent years and years in the minors. He was a guy that always played great defense, but was like a sub 700 OPS every single year. And they developed him to the point where like now we're talking about him being a league average performer at the major league level as far as WRC plus goes. We're talking about Matt Mervis, who was in a weird year, an undrafted free agent. Now he's on the 40-man roster. Alexander Canario was like not really a finished product when he was acquired for the San Francisco Giants, right? Like he was a guy who whiffed a ton and didn't walk all that much at all. Obviously big time power, but they developed him into somebody that is usable at major league level. And so like my frustration is taking those guys and looking at those success stories in terms of development and then saying, all right, now we got to trade him, which still makes sense. But you're trading him for a reliever that are so volatile in terms of like what they can produce year in and year out. And so like it's frustrating. Like you pat the Cubs on the back and you say, great job developing these guys. I'm glad you could get something in return from them. But at the same time, you're like so frustrated that you can't get more for
sure.
all of that work.
For sure. I totally understand that. With as you're talking about that, it reminds me of maybe a dumb idea that I have with prospects. You, Brian, Zumac, Todd, you guys watch this way more than me. So I'm coming from an uninformed perspective. But when we're talking about Vasquez and Velasquez and Canario and Mervis's underwhelming performance in 2 stints, and PCA's unexpected improvement and Morel's unexpected improvement, I've always operated under a sense of urgency in promoting guys. Mm-hmm. I want to promote them as fast as possible. It's not just because I want to see them contribute to the big league team. No, I need to see how they adapt, number one, because the environment is unlike any environment they've been exposed to. With certain players like PCA and Morel, they get better. With other players like Mervis, they either can't live up to the moment or they're exposed by major league pitching. That's useful information. For Morel, it was useful because it made the Cubs proceed without having to maybe trade some of their prospects to fill positional voids, because Morel became a guy they can project. With PCA, we're seeing it play out in real time. He's not being sent down, and the entire outfield is healthy. This is something that I don't think I'm pinching myself this is happening right now. And then Mervis, his development, 2022, a lot of controversy of the lack of call-up in September, whatever, but it's useful information. So when we talk about this conversation of being frustrated with trading Velasquez for Quas, I share that frustration as well. I really do. But my uninformed, perhaps stupid opinion is that I wish the Cubs going forward are more aggressive with these promotions and put them to the test. I know they're 21 years old. I know they're 22 years old. I know you have 40-man issues or whatever, but you get such quality information about these guys when you are super aggressive. And who knows, man, maybe that's one way to unlock the development of some of these guys.
I think that it really goes to show how small of a difference, like what goes into the difference between Christopher Morel and Alexander Canario. That's super important to me, because 2 guys that were ranked around the same in terms of like where they were ranked in the Cubs system when they were coming up through and once they made it to the major leagues, right? The 10 to 20, right? Again, that same range, the 10 to 20 range. Both Morel and Canario, really good athletes, really good bat speed. I mean, both guys were in the top 10?
Basically top 5. Hit or miss a few decimal points.
You look at those 2 guys. Look at Canario and Morel. There's not that many differences. There's not that many differences in like their profile. I mean, they play different positions, but like their offensive profile, extremely similar.
Yep.
And you got Morel, who is on the brink of being a stud. And you got Canario, who is on the brink of being just like another Nelson Velasquez. And like that is wild.
I hear you, man.
That is such a small little like difference that makes a huge difference in the grand scheme of things for a prospect making it to the major league level. And that is something I will never ever be able to explain away.
Oh man, gosh, it's such a hard conversation to have, because we started this with Brennan Davis. How do you get Brennan Davis playing time? And now we're at the tail end of this talking about how do you get Canario playing time and avoid the inevitable, which seems inevitable at this point, trade for a reliever.
Well, and you want to call up guys quicker, so you got to get Owen Casey in there too. So
this is what I mean. This is why you and I are doing a podcast on a Sunday morning, and then you have guys making millions making these decisions.
Exactly. All right, man. Let's talk. I want to talk 2 more pitchers before we wrap this up.
Okay.
Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown.
Sure.
Jordan Wicks and Ben Brown are both succeeding. Obviously, Wicks is on the IL right now, but both succeeding in different ways in Chicago. What stood out with Wicks for you?
More breaker usage, curveball, slider. very pleasantly surprised with that. Fewer cutters. He talked to our guy Ryan Herrera, CHGO, over the offseason in spring training about how he threw more cutters with the big league team. Other than that, I thought he looked pretty good. Again, the numbers may not represent how good he's looked, but in a few starts, that so it goes sometimes. I still think Wicks is the likely candidate to be your every fifth day pitcher. Love seeing what he showed. I hope he comes back healthy and gets opportunities.
Dude, the juxtaposition between looking at Christopher Morel and Alexander Canario and being like what are they? Like how good they can they be? To then looking at Jordan Wicks and be like, he is exactly who we thought he was.
I could tell by your eyes you were thinking that too.
Like, dude, he is just constantly tweaking, just like getting outs. Numbers are good, but like the vibes are immaculate. It's just Jordan Wicks is exactly who we thought he was as a prospect, as a first-year player, as a rookie this season, as a 12th year player in the major leagues in 2036. He is who he is, and I love it.
The foundation, the fastball, the changeup, and then the ability to develop these different pitches, it's unique. It makes me believe he's just an every fifth day guy.
Exactly.
For you though, once he comes back healthy, we get questions all the time. What do you do with the rotation? Because Javier Assad is looking like maybe an every fifth guy for the current moment. Wisniewski's looked good, so you can imagine him maybe playing a multi-inning role, spot starts here or there. With Wicks, do you get him comfortable in AAA, then call him back up? What would be your preferred path forward?
I think that with Wisniewski in the rotation right now, right? Wisniewski's there in the rotation. I think that Jordan Wicks will go through his rehab process. I'm sure get a few rehab starts in Iowa in somewhere. I'd assume it's probably Iowa. And then I think he takes Wisniewski's spot in the bullpen or in the rotation, and then Wisniewski gives the bullpen some help, much like we've seen kind of Ben Brown kind of throwing multi-innings and stuff like that. I think that helps significantly in terms of what we've seen from Wisniewski has been terrific. And so I think being able to slot Jordan Wicks and have that confidence and you're still getting really solid innings, like that's just so comforting to have that. And then you have that, like the high upside with Wisniewski in the bullpen works really well.
It's Wisniewski, but specifically it's the comparison with Hendricks. That's what we're getting. Yeah. So we're not going to go down that direction.
Yeah.
But with a full health rotation, you have Shota, you have Steele, you have Tyone, you have Assad, and then you have the fifth spot being Hendricks or Wisniewski or Wicks. So that's where a lot of fans have some angst because they see Hendricks performing bad and they see guys with higher young ceilings with Wicks.
I do not know how you handle Kyle Hendricks. I will leave that to you guys on the Major League Show because I've got nothing on that one. Yeah. Ben Brown, he's been phenomenal. He's been terrific. He has been, I think that in a lot of ways, what we had hoped for as prospect followers early last year, we had kind of dreamed on this scenario with Ben Brown. He had a rough ending to the 2023 season, but Ben Brown has been just lights out for the Chicago Cubs.
Taking a page out of Justin Steele's playbook, two-pitch guy, north to south death ball, if you will, with that 88 mile per hour knuckle curveball is how it's being classified. Fastball 95, 96, 97. 3 innings, 4 innings can be used in the 7th inning plus in max effort roles if they need him to be that. Better than I expected. The question I had for Brown was the ability for the curveball to play against right-handed batters. Mm-hmm. When he was called up, you see the north to south curveball profile. You see the fastball being relatively straight within, the normal distribution for someone like him. And then immediately you compare him to Julian Merriweather, who has the same type of profile. North to south, heavy breaker, and a relatively straight, high velocity fastball. With Merriweather and Brown, Merriweather also is able to get right-handed batters out. So the only question I had with Ben Brown was if he's going to be a two-pitch guy, can he get right-handed batters out? The curveball is very unique. Going into the year, the projection was yes, he can, but with a pitch like his, there aren't many pitchers who throw a similar pitch. So you still have that uncertainty at the big league level. So far, the answer to can that pitch get right-handed batters out is an obvious yes. So, and that does not seem to have a potential to change anytime soon. With Brown now, the question is, do you move him more into a max effort role and sacrifice some of the long-term starting rotation development for the sake of eating high leverage innings? I don't have an answer for that. It is May. I'm interested in Ben Brown as a long-term multi-inning starting pitcher guy, but at the same time, I'm also aware this bullpen needs his type of value in the back end of the bullpen. It's a difficult question to talk about.
Yeah, that's a really tough one. I don't know, man. I don't want to see any type of development as a starting pitcher sacrificed for him being a guy who throws 1 inning max effort every other day. That because and the main reason why I say that is because up to this point, I think it's selfishly speaking, it's played out exactly like a lot of us had hoped it would play out, where he is a starting pitcher. He is a starting pitcher in the minor leagues. He gets called up and he works out of the bullpen. He throws multi innings. He does a great job of doing that, only to get transitioned in year 2 or year 3 back into the starting rotation, a la Justin Steele, right? And it's playing out exactly like we all hoped it would. And to transition into a 1 inning max effort relief pitcher this year, that does not mean that if he does do that he can't ultimately become a starting pitcher next year or the year after that. It's a change in style of pitching, and it just worries me. But
yeah, same. I don't want it to happen right now either. We get asked this all the time. The Julian Merriweather void and the natural insertion due to his similar profile makes sense, but we don't know where the staff is going to be in 2 months, and he actually may need to eat multiple innings.
I was going to say, I don't, I don't mind at all that, like, considering how the bullpen in Chicago is set up right now, and like it's just struggling as a whole, I think it actually might make more sense for him to eat a few innings at a time and like really just save more guys that aren't very good from having to throw more often. So like maybe he's more valuable that way right now. And then you get to the playoff run, then you get to September, and then he's used as a one inning guy at that point. Once you get to this playoff run,
that's my ideal scenario.
I think that'd be great.
The rotation is stabilized to the point where you can make sense for Brown to be a max effort guy. Because you're in September and because he had now 5 months of going multiple innings.
And that doesn't really impact his development as a
does not impact his development.
It's a month worth of games.
It protects his pitch count, actually it's for his benefit.
I'm all in. All in. That's all it took. All right, dude, that's all I've got. You got any other players you wanted to hit on before we wrapped up?
I think we touched on everyone. I guess 30 seconds of Michael Arias, I guess.
Arias,
Arias, sorry.
Yep.
So I'm interested. I was watching his YouTube videos.
Yeah, so I think that Michael Arias is. I know. We talked about all these relievers. There's just a lot of really good relievers. He's already in the 40-man roster. He's a guy we could see in Chicago later this year. He's been terrific.
Could we see him up after Porter Hodge?
I'd be surprised. If he skipped over AAA Iowa.
Okay.
I'd be surprised. I mean, it's a possibility because he's already in the 40-man roster. I emphasize more than anything on this podcast that, like, once you're on the 40-man roster and you're in Tennessee, you don't need Iowa a lot of times.
Didn't Palencia skip Iowa?
Palencia, I think.
Did he skip Iowa?
I can't remember. I can't remember.
I was surprised either way that he was.
I feel like he might have. Or maybe he got a couple innings. He got a few innings. Oh, he had a few innings in the bullpen because he was starting to start off last year, right? And then went back to Tennessee as a reliever, then Iowa as a reliever, then
I forget the timeline.
So, I could see Arias making up to Chicago. I think he gets at least a few games in Iowa just to make sure he's good. But he's been great. To me, the walks coming down. I know he's still walking 9% or 11% of the batters he's facing, way down from last year. That has been the single most encouraging thing for me for Michael Arias is like to go from walking 20% of batters to walking 11% of batters is a major improvement, and like that's what stands out for me. And again, another guy that I don't think he's your closer in September, but he is much more in the mold of a guy like Porter Hodge or Daniel Palencia rather than a guy like Ethan Roberts or Frankie Scalzo Jr. Where Frankie Scalzo Jr. love everything about him, but he's not striking out 35% of the batters he's facing. So just a different mold, but still a guy that you probably can't rely on to be an 8th or 9th inning guy.
Yeah,
in Chicago this year.
I don't think even if you get surprising performances from any of the guys on the roster right now, it's not going to be enough time to justify not trading for a reliever at the deadline. I think it's inevitable.
Fun dude, though. Michael Arias is a fun watch for sure.
Sweet. All right. I'm looking forward to it. That's all I got for you.
All right, man. You want to go ahead and plug your show, plug your stuff, plug your Twitter, all that good stuff?
Sure. So Sunday, CHGO Cub shows with Corey. We are in our 9th season, approaching our decade. Wow. I know, it's kind of crazy.
That's wild. I've been listening to you guys talk for 10 years.
You have. I'm sorry. you're almost depressed. I got some gray hairs in my beard over here. It's like, I'm being serious, man. It's crazy.
Oh, man.
What else? Twitter at Brendan_Cubs. That's basically it.
Yeah.
I listen to you guys all the time. I always try to shout you guys out. You guys do awesome work. If it weren't for, I say this every single time, but I'm just going to do it again. If it weren't for you, Todd, Zumac, Brian Smith, all you guys, I would have no idea what the hell's going on. So I am indebted to you for being aware of the Cubs minor league system and making it more fun to follow this team.
Man, I appreciate it. I emphasize on the show a lot that just like the amount of nerds, for lack of a better term, that are interested in the Cubs farm system is unbelievable, right? And so us doing the writing and the podcasting and stuff like that is just, it's given people a place to tune into one place to try to take it all in, because everybody's interested. People are interested in it, and it's unlike any other organization. So yeah, I appreciate people out there listening, because it's you and everybody else that wants to know more about what's going on in the farm system.
But you guys do a good job too. One of the challenges for me personally is I don't like being referred to as like a numbers person. I really hate that. I think you know me by now. I'm like, I'm a baseball guy. I just love the sport. And what you guys do well is you bring out the human nature of these players, which is awesome. And you make it seem as if they're like on your podcast as like part of the crew. And so I really respect that part of what you guys do, because you humanize them and you talk about the sport with the numbers as complimentary rather than driving the conversation.
And I hope that, and we talked about on this show, where people are so quick to, if a guy struggles at the major league level, a prospect struggles at the major league level after 2 weeks, being like, I'm done with this guy. I don't want to, it's the what Toy Story meme. It's like, I don't want to play with you anymore. They're so quick to do that. And I think that being able to, I think that people don't do that as much with guys that they're watching on their TV screen every single day at the major league level. They don't do that with Dansby Swanson if he struggles for a couple of weeks. They don't do that with their favorite player, Nico Horner. If we can create some guys here through the podcast or through writing or whatever, that they're already your favorite player when they come up to the major league level, then you might be a little bit have more patience with them if they struggle in their first taste of major league action, right?
Exactly.
If people can love Frankie Scalzo and the quirkiness that he is, then you already have a favorite player when he's come up to the major league level. So I think that's the root of all of this, is to give people out their favorite players before they are everybody else's favorite player. You know what I mean?
And it's not for you guys and watching prospects. I think sometimes, because there's so many minor league guys out there, you aren't saying this guy's going to be good and this guy's going to be bad. It's just a matter of explaining what you're seeing, assigning different potentials and ceilings and floors for guys. And the reality is, more times than not, we're all going to be wrong. That's just how that's just how it goes, and it's really difficult for front offices to even do the same. Baseball is driven by human nature, and you can't predict it.
Yeah, if I knew what I was talking about to that degree, then I wouldn't be podcasting. I wouldn't be doing my day job. I'd be working for the Chicago Cubs. So Yeah, dude, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it
Yeah.
very much. We'll get you back on later this season. It's always good to kind of throw a major league spin into all this. I know that you do a great job of kind of combining the two, right? Talking about guys at the upper levels and morphing them into the major league level. So that's always good. So
Thank you.
for a little programming note for this show. So this is dropping. You guys are listening to this on Tuesday. I should pull up a calendar as I'm talking about this. On Tuesday, the 21st, because we have a little bit of differences going on the next few weeks. So you're listening to this on Tuesday, the 21st. Next week, unless something goes wrong, you guys will be listening to on the 28th, it'll be a draft episode from Greg Zumak. I think that he's going solo. He's going to be talking about his most recent mock draft, I believe, and then just kind of talking about the status of the draft as it stands now. Going into July when the draft will actually take place. So that'll be a draft episode on the 28th with just Greg Zumak. The following week on the 4th, I will still not be on the show. I'm going on vacation. It'll be Greg Zumak and Brian Smith talking a normal week, just talking about Cubs prospects as just updates, news and notes, stuff like that, like you typically get with me and Brian or me and Zumak, but it'll be Zumak and Brian. So that's what, and I'll be back the following week. I'll be back on the 11th, back in your ears. So that is what you guys can look forward to over the next few weeks. Kind of different schedule. I apologize, but hopefully you guys don't mind not having to listen to me for a few weeks. That'll actually probably be good. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and appreciate you guys so much for listening. And we'll be back in your ears in one short week. Thanks, guys.